Our podcast is brought to you today by one of our awesome and food-loving sponsors, True Aussie Beef and Lamb and the Big Green Egg. We are super excited to partner with them for a fun summer sweepstakes, you guys.
Go to grillonthegreen.com and fill out the form and let them know that the Hungry Squared podcast referred you and you could win a big green egg.
It's so exciting.
It's a grill and a smoker.
You throw the lamb and the beef on top of that. Oh my gosh. It's the best ever. Join us this summer until August 1st. So August 1st is the last day you can enter. We will be grilling up some stuff and giving you some recipes that you can do also.
Again, that website is grillonthegreen.com. Did you hear about the fight in the kitchen?
I did not.
That fish got battered.
Hungry Squared, bringing you the best food talk anywhere.
Welcome to the Hungry Squared podcast where the brain and belly meet. I'm Sharon from the Wasatch Cooking Guide. This week, we're in Orlando, Florida at Blogger 17, and I'm with
Flea with Jones Natural Chews.
Flea. How's your week been?
It's been fantastic.
Have you eaten anything good this week?
I sure have.
What did you eat?
I had tuna pudding surprise with butterbean ice cream.
Butterbean ice cream.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
So tuna pudding surprise, what is that?
It's a type of a chocolate lava pudding, and it's vanilla bean ice cream, but that's what they call it.
Oh, so they call it tuna, but there's no tuna in it.
Correct.
Oh, good. Oof. Okay.
And
butterbean ice cream. Okay.
Delicious.
Yum.
And what have you had to eat this week?
I went to a little local place by Legoland. My extended family and I went to Legoland, and we went to a place called Harry's Old Place, and we had surf and turf, and it was pretty good.
That sounds good.
Science, design, and so much more. It's all the food talk you're looking for. Hungry Squared, yeah.
This week, we get to talk to Brad Bernhart of Earlywood.
Earlywood.
Yeah, they make beautiful, beautiful kitchen spoons.
Change your cooking life forever.
Yeah, seriously. Let's talk about it.
And now for the main course.
Oh my gosh, Sharon. It's good to be back.
It is good to be back. It's good to be back in the dry heat of Utah.
So we were at a conference in Orlando just recently.
Let me remind you, Orlando in June.
And it was fun. We met a lot of awesome people. Shout out to all of the peeps out there. We had such a great time. But the heat about killed us. No. The humidity about killed us.
Yeah.
It all gets rolled up into some hot mess over there. I was a hot mess.
I was a hot mess too. I was a hot, sweaty mess. Also, shout out to the people at Blogger 17 that we met. I was really sweaty and I stunk. And some of you hugged me, and I'm sorry.
But it was fine. So thanks so much.
It wasn't, and I'm really sorry.
It was really fun, though, to meet everybody and to be with you. So thanks for coming and hanging out. I'm glad we're back and we're recording.
Yes, we're back in the game.
Back in the saddle.
Back in the
again.
routine.
Yeah, it's nice to be in a routine and to be sleeping in your own bed and in the dry heat.
In my air conditioner.
I know.
Okay, let's get down to our first topic at hand. We're here with Brad from Earlywood. Earlywood is a company based in Montana. They make kitchen utensils that are multi-purpose and beautiful.
Yes, we are so excited. We met him at a conference and we were just blown over by the beautiful, beautiful designs. And it is well thought of. And he's an engineer. So he really scienced the crap out of them. He just really thought through it.
They fit well in your hand. They have a lot of good balance. They're gorgeous.
So we're excited for you to hear this episode because you're going to just get bowled over by some of the science that he talks about, as well as the artistry. We're excited, and here's our episode. Hey everybody, we are here today with Brad Bernhart of Earlywood. It's a company that he started, and it seems like, Brad, you had quite the history of when you started. You were definitely working full-time as a mechanical engineer, but then decided to start this in 2011, trying to do two jobs at the same time. making these beautiful, beautiful wooden utensils. And it just took off, if I'm not mistaken, and you started full-time making these handcrafted goods in 2013. Does that sound about right?
I think you got it about right.
Awesome.
And I lasted about 2 years working 2 jobs at the same time, and then it just got to be too much.
It was too much.
I had to quit one, and engineering got the axe.
We met Brad at a conference, and we were so excited to talk to him about design in kitchen tools. I know we've had an episode about kitchen tools, so we're really excited to delve into somebody that actually has designed something, that has thought through the process, and we're excited to share this interview with you today. Let's get started. How did you get started doing this? What made you get into woodworking specifically?
Well, the farthest thing I remember back when I was a kid was when I was in my basement looking for something to do, and my dad just gave me a 2x4 and a handful of nails and said, pound these into there. And I probably spent days and days and days just pounding nails into wood in my basement. So that's probably the very beginning. But after high school, I did some building, just some, residential home building and whatnot. So that kind of got me into wood in the first place. But then it was really when I was in college and in the mechanical engineering program, which is kind of, it's not the most artistic of programs. It's pretty much all math and science. So I needed something to just kind of release the artistic side. And I didn't have any money, so I went and bought like 2 tools at a store, and I bought a couple pieces of wood, and I just started kind of whittling away and making spoons just for something to do that was creative. And it turns out I really liked it.
So how did you decide to incorporate the food and cooking aspect? Like, why did you decide on the spoon? What drew you to that?
Whenever you go to someone's house and you walk through their kitchen, they usually got some special wooden spoons sitting there. Lots of times they're the 50-year-old spoon that their grandma had or something like that. And I was just always drawn to them, just the quality, the wear, the color. And I thought, that's something that I'd like to make. I remember going through those kitchens, and all that stuff is super old, and you'd see a spoon that's like 50 or 60 years old, and you say, that's great. And then you go to, like, let's say Target or anywhere that you're going to buy any wooden spoon, and the ones that are for sale today are pretty much exactly the same as the ones that your grandma bought 60 years ago. And it just seems like there has been no innovation and no change in the spoon arena for a while. So I said, hey, I'm gonna hop in here and I'm gonna start doing this.
The spoon arena.
The first time those 2 words have ever been said together.
You're right. Now that you say that, I'm like, yep, I have spoons that look exactly like what my parents had. And I think that's cool that you decided to go with it. So really quick kind of side note, do you and your wife cook then together?
We do. We have 2 kids, 3.5 years old and 5 years old. So sometimes we're cooking good meals that we want to eat, and sometimes it's just survival cooking. And we've kind of resulted to cooking in bulk and freezing because life's busy enough and the kids are busy enough that we try to cook something tasty and divvy it up into bags, freeze it, and then break it out for the kids. So, but we're constantly cooking. We're a house of 4, so there's always something going on.
Well, and you are a user of your tools, so that makes a big difference. So
yeah, that it does. That's how you know if you're making something good or not, is when you use it for about 5 years.
When you do use your tools, what are your favorite ones to use and why?
Oh, I would say my favorite is definitely one tool that I make myself. It's called the large flat sauté, and people call them. When I used to do craft fairs, people would call them paint stirrers all the time, and because they admittedly kind of look like a paint stirrer, but they're 13 inches long, kind of thin, lightweight. They've got a nice balance, and they're just super clean and simple, but really multifunction. And I've gotten to where I use 2 at all times. I never really stand at the kitchen and just stir a pot with one utensil anymore. I'm always using 2, and it's a lot more efficient of a process to get everything moved around and off the heat and spread around and whatnot. So that would definitely be my favorite, I would say.
What were some of your inspirations for design? So you've got this long, flat paint stirrer type saute, right? So how did you think of, what was your creative process in thinking of new designs for a spoon?
So I was a mechanical engineer, and I was a mechanical design engineer, basically. So I designed products for the company I was working for, and it was so far from spoons, it wasn't even funny. I was designing these rock cutting dredge cutter heads for seagoing vessels that make canal, deep in the Panama Canal, and make those islands down in Dubai and whatnot. So that's what I was doing, but it was design. And, it kind of just gave me a critical eye. And I started making spoons just because that's what everyone made. You hear of wooden spoons, and that's what everyone makes. So I started making them, and I had some spoons laying around, but then I really got analytical about it. And when I was cooking, I was not even really thinking about what I was cooking, but thinking about how that spoon was working. And I just kept changing the features that the spoon had. And every time I changed that feature, it got more and more simple. It's like the bowl part on the spoon, for example. If you're cooking with the spoon, you might use that to taste whatever it is you're cooking. But you really don't need a bowl to taste. You don't need to have that much. It's not like you fill up your spoon and you drink that whole bowl. If you just have something flat, you can get enough on there to get a good taste too. So I got rid of the bowl. And then the front of the spoon was too thick to get under like a pancake if you're going to use it for that. So I got rid of that thickness and I made it thinner. And then you come back around the edge of the bowl where it turns into a handle, and there's no reason why it has to come down to a thin round handle there. So I got rid of that and I just made straight edges on it. And then you look at a handle itself and it's just a round dowel in most cases. And there's nothing special about a round dowel other than it spins in your hand and you can't really control where it is. So I got rid of the round and I made it flat. So I guess it was kind of twofold. So I looked at it from a real technical kind of a design standpoint like that and kind of simplified things as it went. And then, this business has kind of evolved over the years, and it's not like I was designing products and just immediately putting them on the website and immediately pushing them and trying to sell them and things. Like, I didn't really have the money or the time to do that. So I made these designs, and then, sometimes I used them for 4 or 5 years before I even sold one. So they got refined just from years of use too.
I'm just sitting there oh yeah, you don't need a bowl in a spoon, like that. Yeah. Kind of basically the little cup portion of the spoon. We always just grab a different spoon and use that to taste.
You end up using your finger or whatever to clean that bowl out because something gets stuck in there anyways, and you don't want it stuck in there.
Exactly. You're totally right.
unless you're serving, in which that's a whole different category.
Exactly.
The serving spoon is different from the cooking spoon in my opinion, and that's why I don't even actually make a cooking spoon. I just make the scrapers and the sautés. I do make spoons for serving, but I just don't even make them for cooking.
That makes so much more sense. Okay, I didn't realize this, but when you mentioned that at the very end, some of these scrapers, the other ones that are out on the market, they're too thick to get under a pancake, and I was like, that's right. So I have one of your long flat saute spoons, I guess, and it is nice and thin, you guys, and it's totally true because you can kind of use it as a scraper too in a lot of different ways. So I feel like this is a multi-use tool, like we discussed in our kitchen tools episode. One thing I was going to ask, on your sautés, those flat saute scrapers, it has kind of a rounded edge, the scraper part. Any thought on that one? Because I know your terrace scraper has more of a straight edge. Did you think about why you made one kind of a little bit more rounded while the other one's a little bit straighter?
Yeah, I did. The scraper I designed with cast iron in mind. Really, anytime you're sticking something to the bottom of a pan, if you're using a wooden spoon and say you've got some eggs in your pan, if you're trying to get the eggs off the bottom, you're just going to end up with a bunch of little squiggly marks and you're going to get some of it off, but not all of it. So this scraper, I made the handle nice and beefy with a nice sharp front flat edge on it. So you can take 3 or 4 passes through your pan and everything's up and moving around. The saute, the flat saute, does have a slight radius on the front. And my idea there was, if you're holding it in your hand, if you were holding the scraper, let's say, with the super flat front, there's only one orientation in which that whole front edge is on the pan. If you move your wrist and you're kind of stirring around, you're just teeter-tottering from edge to edge, which isn't the best thing. So on the saute, I put a slight radius, so you can imagine holding that in your hand and kind of spinning it around in the pan, and there will always be part of that edge in contact with the pan, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. And
that may not make sense.
No.
That's kind of hard to explain.
No. I totally, because, okay, think everybody out there, it's like you're stirring something. And so you got to have a point of contact on your bowl or whatever pan that you're dealing with. And so with that kind of, like he said, there's a slight radius on the front. There's always going to be some sort of point of contact, which is really nice. That's really, really nice. And then I'm going to do a shout out for your Terra scraper, which I love because we do have a cast iron pan and we use it on all the time.
So your wood's really beautiful. I love using the tools because they feel good in my hand, but I've noticed that there's all these different deep, rich colors of the wood. What kinds of wood are you using, and how did you decide to use these different types of wood? Because they don't look like my regular old wooden spoon that you'd buy at Target. And how did you decide to use these different types of wood?
Yeah, no, they definitely don't. The old wooden spoon you bought it or would buy at Target is probably made out of beech. If it's within the last 20 or 30 years, if it's older than that, it could have even been made out of pine or fir. The 4 different kinds of woods I use are hard maple, bloodwood, which you may or may not have heard of, jatoba, which you probably haven't heard of, and Mexican ebony, which you most definitely haven't heard of. I chose these woods for a couple of reasons. One was color. You know, you've got a blonde color, a red, a brown, and a black, so you can pretty much get one to look good in your kitchen, no matter what it looks like. But more importantly than that was grain, like the tightness of the grain, the size of the pores, the stiffness of the wood, the toughness of the wood, and there's all kinds of different properties that woods have, and I definitely I wanted 4 that were kind of different in color to give it kind of a good aesthetic when you pair them up. And then I kind of took those general colors and I just kind of started going through every single wood I could find, and I was crossing them off the list if they were too soft or if they were endangered or anything like that, or hard to get or too expensive or whatever it might be. And I ended up with these 4, and I make almost all of my products out of all 4. 2 of the woods are actually too hard, and you can't dry a piece that's thicker than an inch thick, so I can't make everything out of those woods. But I wanted to use woods that are better than the old woods that like your grandma's spoon was made out of. And, you know, your grandma's spoon might have lasted 50 years, and maybe it was round to start with, and maybe there was a corner that's been rubbed off over the course of 50 years. And I thought, hey, if I can make a spoon something like that, and I can make it out of a wood that's 4 times better than that one that lasted 50 years, this thing is going to, I mean, lots of times I'll say your grandkids are going to pass these on to their grandkids, you know. So I'm really trying to make an heirloom here that just can be passed from generation to generation because these woods are so good.
So how did you source these woods? I mean, what was your research process for that? And how did you find out where to get them from? Because it looks like these are sustainable. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, the hard maple, that comes from the northeastern United States, and it's about as hard as wood grows in the United States. You can grow woods that are a hair harder, but not in any kind of quantity that you'd really want to harvest. So hard maple was kind of the hardest of the domestics, you know, that grow here in the United States. So I wanted to use that for sure. And I like hard maple. It's a nice light blonde color and has really nice closed grain. Mm-hmm. And then the others, I started with the list of pretty much every wood you can imagine and started crossing them off the list until I came up with these. And it took me, I didn't just choose them and start going with it. There was a couple woods. I was using one called Ipe, and I was using one called Paduke. And I was using some Peruvian walnut and various things over the years, and they've just they seemed like a good idea at the time. And as I worked with them more and more, I realized that they had various problems, like a Paduke. If you make a spread or anything out of Paduke and you set it on a white tablecloth, it stains it white, or it stains it red, sorry.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and even if you put it in like on a concrete countertop or in a Tupperware, it'll stain that red too. It like gives off
Wow.
It doesn't even have to be in direct contact with it, which is odd, but it can stain things from a distance. So I tried a couple others and then, got rid of them for various reasons. And the 4 I've ended up with, I'm just really happy with. And, a couple of them are exotic, so they have some oils in them that make things a little bit difficult sometimes, but I've done enough research and trial and error that I can make it work with these woods now.
I love the Mexican ebony. It's just this beautiful, dark black. Quick question. I've heard of hardness and softness of woods for different utensils. Now, I'm assuming you want something harder, whether it's for a scraper or a cutting board. Can you talk a little bit about hardness and what specifically you were looking for in that? If there's is there a hardness scale that woods are based off of? And what is the best for, say, like a cutting board and for some of the tools that you have?
That's a good question. And this is where the mechanical engineering background comes in, because I was, I took plenty of classes on strength of materials and things like that. So lots of people throw around hardness and toughness and strength and don't know that there's really a difference. But just to kind of sum it up real quick, hardness is basically resistance to wear. And strength is resistance to breaking, like shattering, let's say. And let's see, what else? What am I missing here? Hardness and strength.
Is there? Is it something like flexibility? No, I guess that would be strength, wouldn't it?
Yeah, there's a like a stiffness kind of. I guess you could say you're saying flexibility, but the measure of stiffness is actually something. The modulus of elasticity. But we don't need to go there.
We could totally go there. No, just kidding.
The slope of the strain stress curve. But we don't need to go there. But so hardness is basically the resistance to wear. And like if you're talking about the terra scraper with that nice front edge that's just going to be rubbed on cast iron, you want pretty much as hard of a wood as you can to maintain that nice edge as long as possible.
And then can we talk about pore size of the woods? I was under the impression, and maybe you can set me straight, I was thinking that like a small pore size would be better for some of the tools that will be in the kitchen because it is basically more water resistant. Is that correct? Or am I off the beaten path on that?
I think you're totally right on that. Yeah, the smaller the pores, usually the better. Some woods have pores that are big enough that you can actually get food in there or bacteria in there, and you just can't wash it out by using a sponge and hot water. So you definitely want to pay attention to that. And I also pay a lot of attention to the orientation of the grain in the piece. And so you can minimize, if you do have a wood with some pores that are a little bit bigger, you can minimize the size of those pores by orienting the grain a certain way.
Oh, so it resists water more then?
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah, because you're just, there's ways to cut it such that the pores are they are a little bit smaller on the surface.
And I was going to say less surface exposure to whatever water it's coming into contact with. Okay.
Exactly.
That makes sense. Sharon brought up the sustainability mission that you have. Would you mind telling us what you guys do when people buy your products? Because I love this.
Cool. We have kind of modified our system for replanting trees over the years, and where we're standing right now is for every single order we get, whether it's for $200 worth of stuff or it's a $7 bottle of oil, we take $1 right off the top and we donate it to replant trees down in the Atlantic rainforest in southern Brazil. Some of the woods, our maple is grown in the United States, and that's totally sustainable here. The Mexican ebony is grown down on the Yucatan Peninsula, and that's actually grown on plantations. They're very serious about their sustainability down there, and they mark their trees for size. They have a large plantation of these trees. They only harvest one particular part of their plantation once every 20 years. And when they do, they only cut trees of a certain size. So the Mexican ebony plantations down there support these little communities, and they're pretty good about making sure they're not going to cut all their wood right now and live high on the hog for a minute and then be totally out of a income source down there. So, but the other two, the Jatoba and the Bloodwood, they can grow from southern Mexico all the way down to about the middle of Argentina. And some of those areas are in rainforest areas. Because I don't want to cut corners on quality, you need those kinds of woods. And because they come from there, I just want to make sure we're not making anything worse as a result. So we donate $1 for every order we have. And, it's been a while since I've checked, but I don't think we're over 10,000. We might be at maybe $6,000 or $7,000 that we've donated so far.
That is great. Awesome. I love that. I love that.
Thanks. Yeah, it's just, a wood supply is our bread and butter here. I mean, we need that. So part of it's because we want to make sure Earlywood can actually stay as a viable thing with good supply. But the most important part is just, we want to give back. And if Earlywood goes big someday, the bigger Earlywood gets, the more difference we can make.
So can you talk a little bit about the care of the different woods? Is there different care for different products that you have? Like, do the cutting boards get different care than maybe some of the sautés? And then can you kind of go into a little bit about why we should oil the wood?
Yeah, that's a great question. I get that all the time, and people have all kinds of different ideas on what works and what doesn't. I always tell people just wash anything wood with hot soapy water and use the scratchy side of your sponge. So as wood soaks up water and then dries out, you'll get something it's actually called raised grain, but it just seems like it makes your wooden utensil kind of fuzzy. And if you use the scratchy side of your sponge, that green side on your sponge, that's actually like a Scotch-Brite pad, and it's actually got aluminum oxide in it, which is the same thing as sandpaper. So if you use that side of your sponge, you're just constantly taking off the tiniest little layer of actually wood. It's almost like you're sanding it. And if you use the scratchy side, you will keep that fuzz down to a minimum, and it'll keep the natural color of the wood coming out. In our case, we don't use any stain at all. These are all natural wood colors, so they are that color all the way through. So if you keep taking off the tiniest little layer, you'll just get natural color keep coming up, and they'll be looking great. As far as cutting boards versus utensils, I treat them all the same way. Cutting boards, they can use oil a little bit more often than a utensil. Lots of times, a real thin piece of wood like the sauté, you don't really have to worry about cracking because there is a free surface, I guess you could say. Well, that's not the best way to explain it. Let's just put it this way. Thin wood doesn't crack very easily, but a thicker piece will crack because there can be more internal stresses in a thicker piece of wood, and they're more likely to crack. So the thicker the piece of wood, the more you want to oil it, and the more you want to scrub it with that Scotch-Brite.
I'm still trying to figure out that internal stress thing. Okay, I'm going to have to think about that.
Yeah. Is there another way I can explain that? Wood is just a natural material, and if you look at any old tree, if you cut down a tree or you're walking through the forest and you look at a tree, you can see that sometimes the grain or the tree just grows straight up. Sometimes you find trees that are twisting. And let's say you found a tree that was kind of growing to the side, let's say, and it was kind of hanging in one direction. So that the wood in that tree is keeping that tree from just falling over. So if it's off to the side and there's all this weight kind of pulling down on the tree, and it's just the trunk that can keep it up, the wood on the bottom side of the trunk or on the bottom side of the tree is in compression. It's just being squished. You can imagine taking like a ruler and bending a ruler. It's the same kind of a thing. The bottom side is under compression, while the top side of that tree trunk that goes up is in tension. So the wood at the top is constantly being pulled and stretched, while the wood at the bottom is constantly being compressed together tighter. So then you imagine you cut that tree down and you cut it up into boards, and you can easily get a board where half of that board grew in tension and the other half grew in compression. And once you cut that into a board and it starts to dry, it does all kinds of weird stuff. It will, it'll warp, it can cup, it can dish, it can do all kinds of different things. And when you have those kinds of stresses inside a piece of wood, they're acting against each other, and it can actually just pull itself in half. It could just start cracking, and it's the same thing you see with like a piece of firewood. If you have a piece of firewood and you just leave it out for a while, it's going to start cracking on the ends. And that's just because of those internal stresses pulling the individual fibers in different directions.
Okay, thank you. You did a very good job explaining that, because that makes way more sense. Okay, thank you.
We're over here having a light bulb moment.
This stuff is harder to explain than it doesn't come out as well as it seems it's going to in my head.
No. That was actually really well. You did a great job, because because I've had wooden cutting boards and they have cracked. It's because I haven't taken good care of them. And so it kind of makes sense to keep it oiled and just make sure that doesn't get additional stresses by drying out, right?
Yeah. And you really don't want one side drying out more than the other side, or one part of it drying out quicker than another part. That's what really messes with you. Like I've actually got, I guess it was a while ago now, but I wrote a whole blog post on how to fix a warped cutting board, and mainly how to fix a cupped cutting board, because most of the time, and I see this all the time when I go to people's houses, they have a cutting board and they leave it sitting flat on their counter. And after a number of months, it looks like a bowl. It's cupping up like a bowl. And people try to soak it in water and iron it and put it under pressure and clamp it and this and that and everything else. But the best way to fix a cupped cutting board is just turn it over. It cups because the top of the board is exposed to air, and that dries out, and that wood shrinks when it dries, and the wood on the bottom doesn't shrink, so it cups up like a bowl. So if you just turn it over, it starts drying the other side, and it'll flatten itself right back out. But if you leave it there too long, it'll cup in the other direction. So you just got to keep moving them.
So would you recommend then storing them not horizontal but vertical, or would that cause some issues and different stresses by being stored vertically?
I store all of mine vertically, actually.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
That's what
I've
we
got
do
a
too.
huge, I've got way too many in my kitchen. My wife gave me an ultimatum the other day. She said, every time I put in a new cutting board in the kitchen, I have to take one out because it's getting a little ridiculous in there.
That's awesome. We will actually put a link to that blog post, Brad, just because I have it right here in front of me, and I was like,
okay.
Yeah, I'll put that in the show note. Just getting back to your design and testing process, I know that you said that sometimes you'll use something for several years and before you're like, oh, I need to make a change to this and that. How many prototypes did you think you went through as you developed, say, like your flat saute?
For the flat saute, that one particular product, I bet I went through, I bet you could say 20 probably just for that one. And it just kind of evolved over the years. And, the last 5 or 10 were more minor changes. The first 10 were more major changes to the design, I would say. But I've got, I only have so much time to release new products right now, unfortunately, but I've got a bin of about 20 new products that I've just ready to release as soon as I have the time. And they're on a list, and as soon as I have the time, I just pick one off the top and start figuring out how to make it in bulk, and then release it. Yeah.
That was going to be my next question. Are you doing any research and development on new products to expand your line?
So a lot of the research and development for new products was done, in those years while I was an engineer. Before I was doing both businesses, there was probably 4 years where I was just making a ton of spoons and just doing product development. And I would, have my wife and all of her friends come over, and they'd use them and they'd vote on them and things like that. And they were great guinea pigs. Yeah, the one I'm working on right now is some rolling pins. I've kind of been wanting to make some French rolling pins, but
those are always so beautiful too.
They are, but I'm not exactly sure what's going to come out next, to tell you the truth. We just bought a brand new shop, and we're moving into that, and we're still kind of recovering from insanity of last Christmas. So new products aren't at the top of the priority list right now, unfortunately.
Really quickly, when you mentioned that your wife would invite all of her friends and just try out all the different tools that you have. So do you just send them out to people, your friends, and just say, tell me what needs to be better? Is that kind of your test subjects and they just give your input, and that's how you kind of honed things?
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly what I do. I haven't been doing that as much lately, but like say, I was just trying some cutting boards and some new wood colors the other day. And I made about 5 or 6 of those, and I just handed them out to people that I know cook a lot. And, they've been giving me some good feedback. And of course, I keep one in my own kitchen and use it as hard as I can to try and figure it out myself. But it's a lot to ask to have one in my own kitchen and try to imagine all the situations in which it could either work well or not work well. So I try and get as many as I can out there in like test kitchens, I guess you could call it.
Yep, that's what it is, right? I think that's great, because I would consider myself not a beginner cook, but it would be interesting to see how a beginner cook would use the tools versus like a more experienced person.
Right. And, some of these, it's funny you'd mention that, because a lot of times, like when I was doing craft fairs, I would have people come to the booth, and if they don't cook very much, they would pick up like the saute, for example, because it doesn't really look like a typical spoon. And they say, "What is this? What's this for?" And then I'd get someone come up that was a chef or just cooks a lot, and they just pick it up and they're like, "I've got to have this. This thing's awesome," Yeah, I don't know if a real beginner cook would. I guess they just grow into it. I guess they would grow into it. Hopefully it'd make them become the better cook.
That's the goal, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay, well, a couple of last things. This has been so enlightening. Like I feel like I've just taken a class in engineering. Like I feel really good about this. Like strength, hardness, flexibility, compression, tension. I mean, it's good. It's I felt like I learned a lot. We love to ask this question to our interviewees every time we talk to them.
Okay, Brad, can you tell us something about yourself that doesn't have to be related to Earlywood that maybe nobody or not very many people know?
Oh, man. Nobody or not very many people know. Let me see.
Something randomly unique.
Well, I guess some people know this, but pre-Earlywood and preschool, I had one major love in my life, and that was skiing, downhill skiing. And
nice.
I took, straight after high school, I went down to a place called Jackson Hole in Wyoming, and I spent 4.5 years down there just putting in about 80 to 100 days of skiing every year. And, I don't do as much anymore as I used to, but I did spend a ton of time doing that back in the day. And it was kind of like my defining characteristic for a long time. And I guess now that characteristic has kind of switched to wooden spoons and Earlywood. But that was a big chunk of my early life.
Nice. I've spent many a happy day at Grand Targhee.
Oh, you have? Yeah, as have I. That makes 2 of us.
That is cool. You were a ski bum and now you're a spoon maker. And Jackson Hole is a lovely place to do it. So
that it is. It's it's got its issues, but it's pretty awesome. All in all.
Brad, thank you so much again. A couple of things that we are going to be doing with Brad. He is holding a giveaway on his website, earlywooddesigns.com. And there's a little giveaway tab. So just take a look around. It should be on the right side of the page. But he's giving away one of his trifecta packages. It has the large saute, and then it has the scraper that I mentioned before, the Terra scraper that I really love on the cast iron because it just has good heft to it. And then the last part of the trifecta is a little spreader, and it works pretty well getting your avocado out. I'm just saying because I've used it before. So if you need that, there's that possibility. And he is also going to throw in a couple of little bonuses. So instead of the trifecta, it's the quadfecta. He's going to throw an extra saute in there and some oil so that you can keep your tools looking beautiful, I guess, throughout the year. So head on over to earlywooddesigns.com and look for that giveaway tab. And it's going to start when this episode airs, which is July 3rd, and it's going to go till the 17th. So just make sure you get on over there, and there will be ways to enter the contest. And we're so excited because we want you to get these in your hands because they are beautiful. One lucky listener will win this quadfecta plus oil. So once again, Brad, if anybody wants to go check out what he does, you can go to earlywooddesigns.com. Follow him on Instagram and on Facebook. It's just beautiful craftsmanship. So check it out there. And we are so excited that we were able to geek out and talk about engineering stuff and your wooden spoons.
Well, thanks for having me, you guys. It's been a blast.
Our podcast is brought to you by our awesome and food-loving sponsor, Zip Schedules. Hungry Squared is supported by Zip Schedules online employee scheduling software. Scheduling employees on a day-to-day basis can be time-consuming for any business manager. Make writing schedules a breeze and create your next work schedule in minutes. With Zip Schedules, you can automatically communicate schedules to your employees.
And you guys, Zip Schedules has a mobile app. I'm all about apps. That's where it's at. The cool thing about the app is that different employees can check and update their schedules whenever they need to. And it makes it much more convenient because they can communicate with each other and with you if they've made a switch because they had to take some time off or they got sick. Zip Schedules is going to make your scheduling life easier and effortless. It's going to be great. So you get your first 30 days for free by visiting zipschedules.com. And I would encourage you to sign up. If you're like, I'm on the fence about it, go try it out. You get 30 days for free, first of all. Try it out. And then if you're like, yeah, this is something that I can use, jump on over and use our promo code HUNGRY, and that's all in uppercase, and you'll receive 20% off each month for up to a year when you sign up. Thanks, Zip Schedules.
Let's have a food fight.
Food fight, food fight, food fight, food fight. It's winter.
This is the segment where you can email us with your relationship questions relating to food. You can email us at hungrysquared@gmail.com.
Disclaimer, we are in no way professional relationship experts, but you should totally listen to us anyway. If you need professional help, please seek it out.
Food fight, food fight, food fight. The food fight segment of the show. Here we go.
Winter, do you have this week's question?
I surely do. And I'm curious to know what you think about it because I have thoughts on it.
Oh.
And I would like to, you'll see what I'm saying when I read this. Okay, it says, Dear Winter and Sharon. There's a little bit more, but it says, the question part says, my neighbor is a jerk.
Okay.
So that's why I was like, well, this one's pretty loaded. It says, I live in an apartment complex. And my neighbor gets annoyed whenever I light up my charcoal barbecue. It emits smoke for a minute or two when I start it up, and he inevitably comes out and complains to me and sometimes to the manager. I'm trying not to be a jerk, but what can I do? I want to barbecue, and I need to barbecue. It's summer. Come on, dude, chill out. That's what he wrote.
All right.
And he signing off as sending smoke and peace signals.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so... sounds like he doesn't want to be a jerk.
Well, I have to agree. It is summer. Summer is the time to grill outside because you don't want to heat up your house.
Yeah.
And if you're living in an apartment, I think that is sometimes more considerate because if everybody's firing up their oven, everybody kind of gets warm because you're sharing walls and stuff like that.
So we like to barbecue in the summer as well. And we are in a situation where we do have neighbors, and that kind of has been a problem in the past when we fired up our grill, and others too. Does that make sense? Like the others have fired up their grill, and then
depending on where your placement is, sometimes it blows directly into somebody else's house.
Yeah,
that happened to us at the last place we lived at. It went right into their master bedroom.
Oh man.
Terrible.
Well,
they actually never complained about it. They were so kind to us.
That's nice. Okay, so what would you do?
Well, there's a couple things you could do. You could switch to propane. It's less smoky.
Yeah, but that's a little bit more expensive.
It depends. But, you could use lump charcoal. It seems so far that we've been using lump charcoal. Less smoky than the briquettes. Burn slower, I think. Maybe that's the case. I'm not sure.
Right.
You could offer your neighbor some of the food that you cooked.
Yeah, as a peace offering. Like, hey.
You don't have to do it every time, but every once in a while, throw him a burger. He might appreciate it.
So the other thing is that So you said lump charcoal. I agree. I think the lump charcoal is less smoky.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think in his email, he said something about how when he starts it, it gets smoky at the beginning. So I wonder what he's using to start it. Because if you're using paper, that's definitely going to emit smoke. So what do you use as a starter?
Oh, we have these like, I don't even know, they're starters.
Mm-hmm.
They are not as smoky as like a lighter fluid.
Mm-hmm.
We can put a link to them in the show notes.
Okay, that'd be great. Because I think we seem to cause problems for our neighbors when we use paper. Because it's easiest, right? You've got a newspaper just hanging out or whatever.
Or you get those like matchlit briquettes and stuff like that. Those can be smoky sometimes.
Yeah. So I think it depends on what you're actually lighting on fires. I feel like there's fire starter cubes, and I feel like Green Egg has some of those. And
that's what we're using.
Yeah.
There's Big Green Egg fire starter cubes, but like I think Kingsford also makes some.
Yeah.
They're less smoky initially.
Yeah, and then you don't have all that kind of funny ash stuff. Like if you burn paper, then inevitably like
you have to wait for that ash to kind of float away, so it doesn't get in your food.
Yeah. So I think that's not a bad route. And then we use a chimney starter, so I wonder if he's using a chimney starter or not. Those help, I feel like.
Yeah.
Kind of keeping everything contained.
Right.
Anybody else have any thoughts? I'm not a barbecuer.
I'm getting into it.
Me too.
Ike's the one that does the grill, but he likes it, and so I'm like, oh, cool.
You just do
You're
that.
going to cook? Sweet. But I've been getting into it so I can learn how to use it when he's not home.
Yeah, exactly. I think the main thing is like just talking to your neighbor. Your neighbor might just be one of those crotchety old men. Did I say that on our podcast?
Crotchety?
Crotchety old men.
Yeah, sometimes. But I mean, they're usually less crotchety when you offer them food gifts.
Yeah. So you can just like, hey, I'm barbecuing some extra chicken legs. Do you want some? And people are usually really excited.
You don't have to even ask. Just give it to them.
Yeah.
Drop it off on the doorstep.
And then you can bake some brownies on your barbecue too and say, guess what I made too? Brownies go a long way. I'm just saying. I think food gifts is the way for me.
Food gifts is the way to anybody's heart. Crotchety neighbor or no. Do a food gift.
Do a food gift and just see how that goes. I bet it'll be better.
And if it's not, at least you'll have given him ants on his doorstep.
Sharon!
Thanks for joining us today on our show. You can find us at hungrysquared.com on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play Music.
Thanks again to Zip Schedules and True Aussie Beef and Lamb and the Big Green Egg for sponsoring our podcast. Once again, check all of them out. There's some fun stuff going to be happening this summer, so join us next week for our next episode of Food Nerdery.
I love you. Bye.
Bye.
Hungry Squared, yeah, Hungry Squared.